Hi there and welcome to the show. Donald Trump is coming back to Canada for a G7 meeting in Kananaskis early next week. The last time he came north was to the Charlevoix summit in 2018 when he refused to sign the joint communiqué and called his host Justin Trudeau dishonest and weak. So can we expect another Trump wrecking ball in Alberta? To discuss this and Mark Carney's emerging foreign policy, I'm joined by Louise Blais, former Canadian ambassador and deputy permanent representative at the United Nations, who is now a strategic advisor to the Business Council of Canada. Louise, welcome back.
It's great to be back on the show, John. Thanks for having me.
So, do you think Trump is going to dominate the agenda in Kananaskis? And can the G7 function properly when the President of the United States clearly disdains multilateralism in all its forms?
Well, I think it will function. Will it function the way it normally does? Probably not. I think that obviously this is the first multilateral meeting since the president came back to power, but all the leaders this time have had practice. They've had their one-on-one meetings with them. They have, obviously, we're all at the receiving end of a slew of tariffs, but you can see that the leaders are trying to find a way to keep relations cordial and move the ball forward. So I think everyone will try to avoid a disaster. It's not without its dangers. It can be unpredictable, but it is my feeling and my sense at this time that the Prime Minister has been speaking to the president, as we have found out. And I don't think he has been speaking to him only about Canada-US relations and the lifting of our tariffs, but I think he's also been speaking to him about the G7 and how we can maybe make him at ease, make the president feel quote unquote welcome and move some things of common interest forward. So I think it's been very well prepared, but you just never know.
Right. I mean, the first question my colleagues are going to ask is, does he still think that Canada should be the 51st state? Which, if he repeats that on Canadian soil, could send the whole thing careering into the sidelines, right?
Well, it could. And I think we have to be prepared that he may raise it again. I think that the same way that the Prime Minister was prepared for it when he visited him at the White House, I think it is something that we'll have to, unfortunately, have to brush aside again. And if he does, I think I would prefer if the media did not ask him the question. I think that would be wiser, but, obviously don't control that. But I think that they have discussed it, I would imagine. They know that this could come. And I think the Prime Minister is prepared to respond in a way that's not going to, derail the entire G7.
So I was on the election campaign with Mark Carney. Just about every night he said that if the US does not want to lead, then Canada will. Do you think that is empty rhetoric, or is this a real opportunity for Canada to set the agenda?
I'm very cautious with that ambition, personally. I think there's a very good chance that the Prime Minister in Canada will shine next week, as of Sunday. I think that if you had asked me a month ago, should we pass on this G7 this year, I would have probably said yes. Too risky, wrong year for us. We're in an election. It was really difficult to prepare. But now that we've on the other side and we're already seeing the elements of the foreign policy that the Prime Minister wants to put forward, we have established some form of cordial dialogue with the president. I think that it's actually turned into an opportunity for Mark Carney to show leadership and to balance sort of the core interest of Canada with international leadership. On the other hand, I think he needs to be careful and not present himself too overtly as an alternative. If the world sees it that way, then fine. But I think he personally has to be careful because, as I said, he has to balance both the president and the president's sense of himself, I will say, as well as what is good for Canada internationally. And I think it's not an or. I think it's an and. I think the Prime Minister sees it that way. He wants to have it the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I think he's going to have to rein himself in a little bit because this is what he's always wanted. I mean, in his book, he says that he was as central banker, he could see a lot but do little. This is his opportunity, his chance to shine. And as you say, if he goes overboard, it's going to upset the apple cart. But moving on, I mean, I take your point about people are going to be sort of walking on eggshells around Trump. But apparently, the first topic for discussion at all of these meetings is the global economy. And the elephant in the room clearly is Trump's tariffs. So how could you possibly hold a credible meeting and not tackle this issue head on?
Well, I think it's what's interesting is as we just speak to each other, just a day or so ago, the president announced a big deal with China. But really, the deal with China was just basically going back to what it used to be before the president was elected and started applying additional tariffs. He got a few things on the fringes, but really, essentially, we're back to square one. So I think this is a president and an administration that might either consciously or subconsciously absorbed over the past several weeks that China is actually quite difficult to budge and that they have a lot of leverage now on the world's economy. And even though their practices obviously are subject to criticism for sure when it comes to trading, I think that the sense probably now in the White House is that it's difficult for the Americans to take on China on their own. And so he's coming to the summit with having absorbed that and having to maybe redirect. He did claim it was a victory, it was a big deal, but I think really they have to understand that on paper, it really is not a huge deal. And if they really want to make headway, they will have to work with allies. So I think I'm hopeful. I don't want to be naive, but I'm hopeful that perhaps there is that element. We know that the people around the president have been sympathetic to Canada and some of the ideas that we have been trying to convince them of in terms of how we help make them more competitive globally. And so I think it's an occasion perhaps to try to showcase that we can work together and not totally, it's not a question of working all the way around China, but it's a question of just maybe bringing back some balance. And that has to happen with allies. And I think that's what I think the leaders will try to discuss with the president when it comes to trade. Now, obviously, there's other things on the agenda. And I don't know if you want to go to, obviously there's a war in Ukraine. That's an area
right.
We don't all agree. And but on trade, I think this is what they're going to try. Everyone's going to try to have a bit of a breakthrough with him. And other than the UK, everyone's working on a deal. The EU, for example, Japan, ourselves. I think what you're seeing is no one's going to totally abdicate. And so everyone's holding a little bit of their cards, and they'll all try, though, to if not come to terms and come to a big deal with him at the summit, but just continue to lay the foundation, the education that is needed. And China, I think, is something that we can all rally in support of in terms of what he wants to do.
I heard former G7 Sherpa and now Canadian Senator Peter Beam say he questions the value of the final joint communiqué where all the leaders sign on to some kind of consensus statement. And he doesn't think there'll be one at this G7. Do you think that essentially we may end up with a statement by Mark Carney as the chair of the meeting, and that will basically summarise the meeting, but no general consensus?
I think that's quite possible. What I'm also hearing is possible that there'll be different statements. There'll be separate statements on different issues. So in other words, not putting everything into one where if you don't agree on every single comma and every single period, the whole thing is out the window. I know that from experience at the UN. It can happen. It's tough. It's really tough to get consensus now in general. In the multilateral world. But so this concept of maybe breaking it down in statements and some join and some not join certain statements, it kind of protects the right to at least move some big ideas forward. Because I think there is value to show some level of unity at the G7, and so you don't want to give it up all completely if you can avoid it. So I think maybe breaking it up is a good plan, but we'll have to wait and see. Anything is possible. I mean, I've learned over the past several months, I've learned one thing. You can think something one day and the next day, boom, a rabbit is out of the hat and we've gone in a different direction. It's a world where things are moving extremely, much faster than they were when I joined the Foreign Service. Now people are on their cell phone, leaders are speaking directly, and all of a sudden you get breakthroughs. So I wouldn't exclude anything, but I think Peter is right. I think the chances of a joint communique is a bit low, and they're already lowering the expectations there. But this idea of maybe different statements on different subjects might be the way to go.
Do you think that the lack of consensus is an indication that the G7's usefulness is diminishing? Or does its power to convene leaders show that it's still an important gathering? I mean, everybody's showing up. The German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, it's his first time meeting most of these leaders. Same with the Japanese Prime Minister. Is there still value in it?
Well, if there was one year where you could have said, he could basically just go by the wayside, it would have been this year. I think the fact that it's being held in Canada, and and we've just had an election, and everyone's coming, including the president, I think is a sign that everyone sees value in the meeting. But nowadays it's the G7, but at the same time it's more than that. Because as you saw, I mean, there's a long list of heads of government and heads of state that are being invited. And I think the Prime Minister has been quite shrewd in his choice of who he has invited. I really think that inviting President Sheinbaum of Mexico was a very good move. I think it's good. It's an opportunity to showcase the North America competitiveness. And I think we have a little bit of repairing to do still of our relationship with Mexico. It's an important relationship. And so you've got all these other countries. You have the Secretary General of the UN who will come, and of course the Prime Minister Modi was accepted. Hopefully he'll still come. It's really terrible what happened with the plane
crash.
But so it's a place where everyone wants to be, and they're waiting for the invitation, and just the fact that Prime Minister Modi is coming is an indication of how much he values the gathering itself.
So let's go there and talk about Mark Carney's foreign policy, which is emerging, and I think this is a symbol of it. I mean, to me, the invitation to Modi and the Saudi Crown Prince MBS, despite human rights concerns, represents a break with Justin Trudeau's values agenda, as does Carney's apparent willingness to talk to China about electric vehicles and canola. What do you think? Are we seeing a break with what came before and the birth of a new realism in Canadian foreign policy?
I think so. I absolutely think so. And I think that there was a shift in that direction near the end. You heard when she was Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mélanie Joly, talk about a pragmatic foreign policy, but really it didn't really manifest itself until Mark Carney became the Prime Minister. It's clear that he's signaling that he wants a foreign policy that is much more focused on our core interests. And those core interests are very simple. They're sovereignty, territorial primarily, and of course economic prosperity. Those are the two things that really Canada needs to focus on. And it's clear that he has even said to himself that he has even said recently that an economic foreign policy, because this is the focus now, because of what we're seeing in terms of what the United States has decided to do in terms of basically upending the world trading system. So now it's a different world. We need to grow up. We need to adapt. And we need to prioritize what those interests are. So, but that doesn't mean that we will sacrifice our values at the altar of our own core interests. I think both, but it's a balance that is shifting. And I think I welcome it. I mean, I was at the UN for a long time, and I hearing back from world leaders and ambassadors who really grew tired of Canada's approach in terms of attaching all sorts of conditions to our relations vis-a-vis values, progressive values, and pushing things that certain countries weren't ready for. And it's okay to try to just bring, try to improve the lives of people around the world. But at the end of the day, we have to think about what is really our impact as a nation. We're not a superpower. We have to be realistic. And I think we certainly can't promote those things at the expense of our own interests. I think that's where it went too far. We ended up really with very complicated relationships with very important powers, some of them regional, some of them global. And it hurt our interests. It hurt, I certainly know that working with the business sector. It closes doors, it makes life more difficult. And we have to think that sometimes we can disagree with the government of the day of a country, but we have to be careful that we have to maintain relationships with the entire country. This is not a conflict with the entire people of India, for example. We have close ties. We have with the country. So it's about balancing, being able to have some of those hard conversations, maybe having them more in private, as opposed to lecturing in public. And you're seeing that. I will end my answer by saying as well that I think the big difference here with Prime Minister Carney is I think he's trying to have a national foreign policy and not one driven by diaspora. I think that's
right. So that's where I was going to go, because notwithstanding the implication of Indian officials in the murder of this Sikh activist in BC, it really was a domestic foreign policy that was dictated by diaspora politics. As one of Trudeau's foreign affairs advisors revealed in an article in the Globe and Mail, they didn't want to do anything vis-a-vis the Khalistani issue because they were worried that people might move to Jagmeet Singh's NDP, for example. In the last election, it looks like the Sikh vote in large measure went to the Conservatives. They elected 6 new Sikh MPs, shifting a lot of away from the Liberal Party, and that seems to me to have created the space for Carney to do what he's doing now. I mean, he does have MPs, Liberal MPs, who are complaining that Modi shouldn't have been invited, but he's not beholden to the Sikh community in the same way he was before. So, to me, these are the kind of ways that diaspora politics may be less important to Carney.
Yes, and I mean that is one example, but I don't think it's the only example. I think you're seeing a shift in the position on the Middle East, and again, you could argue that had interests and diaspora interests in the country. I think he's going to do what's right for Canada, and I think it's not that he's not going to listen. I think you have to listen when you're the leader of a country like Canada, but it's at the end of the day, you cannot be beholden to one community over another. And you've got to think about what is in the best interest of the entire country. And I think this is what's happening now. And I think it adds to our credibility internationally. I think we could be a proud multicultural nation, but we also have to be able to make decisions that are fully evaluated and in terms of the consequences. So we don't really have the luxury we might have thought we had before. And really, to be honest, what has always struck me is no matter how principled the position we ever took, and no matter what the price of that position might have been, we did not impact the change that we had hoped for. So that's the other calculus that has to be made. And I think in the world of diplomacy, the quiet diplomacy often goes a lot further. When the other country knows you're doing this for self-interest and internal domestic politics, it reduces your credibility. And I think that this is what we're seeing with this Prime Minister. He's really trying to speak for all Canadians. He's looking after the interests. And so I don't think it's going to be easy all the way. And we're seeing this with the United States. Each province have different interests and different areas, as you're going to have to balance it all out. And there'll be moments where that will prove itself impossible. I don't want to paint a rosy picture, but I think it's all in degrees, and now the degrees are quite noticeable, and we'll see. I mean, we'll see how it goes at the G7. I'm hoping, and then coming back to a point, I'm really hoping that despite the sort of almost 6 months we've been living through with the President Donald Trump, I do hope that we do welcome him to Canada, and that there aren't any slip up in terms of ways in which he would feel slighted. because I think that will come back to haunt us. I think we have to just stay open, sort of, I would say, take the high road this time, and I think that's our best chance to affect the change. I think it's like that with other countries as well.
Yeah, well, listen, Louise, that's a great place to round off, I think. Thank you very much for your time and for your expertise, and be well.
No, thank you, John.